Every morning at 6:45 a.m., he'd start Route 47, picking up kids from Maple Street to Lincoln Elementary. For 3 years, Mike Torres had been just another school bus driver, the quiet guy who made sure 26 children got to school safely and went home to their families. He never talked about his past, never mentioned where he'd worked before driving buses, and the kids barely knew his name. But when 3 armed men in a black SUV forced his bus off Highway 12 at 7:23 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, they made one critical mistake. They looked at the man behind the wheel and assumed he was just another civilian they could intimidate. They never noticed the small tab sewn into his jacket collar, faded green letters that spelled out 2 words most people would never recognize. And they had no idea that before he was protecting kids on a school bus, he was protecting soldiers in places where failure meant everyone died. Welcome to Warriors. Before we begin this story of hidden courage and split-second decisions, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe that real warriors don't always wear uniforms, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who protect others in ways we never see coming. Route 47 wound through the suburbs of Millbrook like a yellow ribbon, connecting neighborhoods where manicured lawns met tree-lined streets, and every house had a 2-car garage. It was the kind of place where the biggest worry was whether the HOA would approve your fence color, where children rode bikes without helmets, and parents felt safe letting them walk to the corner store. Mike Torres had been driving this route for 3 years, ever since he'd moved to Millbrook from somewhere else. The school district personnel file listed his previous address as Fort Bragg, North Carolina, but nobody at the transportation department had bothered to ask what he'd done there. They saw a clean driving record, a background check that came back clear, and references that described him as reliable and trustworthy. That was enough for them. At 42 years old, Mike looked like every other bus driver in the district, a little gray around the temples, a few extra pounds around the middle, hands that showed the wear of working for a living. He wore the same navy blue uniform every day, kept his route log meticulously organized, and never had a single parent complaint or administrative incident. The kids on Bus 47 knew him as the quiet driver who never yelled, even when they got rowdy. He'd just look in the rearview mirror with those calm brown eyes and say, "Let's keep it down, guys. Safety first." And somehow, that was enough. There was something about the way he said it, not angry, not threatening, just final. Like when your dad told you to be quiet, and you knew he meant it. What the kids didn't know was that Mike had been giving orders in quiet, authoritative tones for most of his adult life. What they didn't know was that the reason he checked his mirrors every 10 seconds wasn't because he was nervous. It was because situational awareness had been drilled into him until it became as automatic as breathing. And what they definitely didn't know was that the small green tab sewn into the collar of his uniform jacket, hidden beneath the fold, bore 2 words that represented some of the most elite training the United States Army had to offer. Ranger Tab. The morning of October 18th started like every other Wednesday. Mike performed his pre-trip inspection of Bus 47, checking lights, brakes, emergency exits, and the radio system that connected him to dispatch. At exactly 6:45 a.m., he pulled out of the transportation yard and began his route, the same 23 stops he'd been making for 3 years. First stop, the Morrison House on Maple Street, where 9-year-old Katie always ran to the bus with her backpack bouncing and her lunchbox swinging. Second stop, the corner of Oak and 3rd, where the Henderson twins climbed aboard, already arguing about whose turn it was to sit by the window. Third stop, the apartment complex on Pine Street, where little Marcus waited with his grandmother, who always waved until the bus was out of sight. 23 stops. 26 kids. The same routine that had become as familiar as breathing. Mike knew every child by name, knew which ones needed help with their seat belts, knew who got carsick if they sat in the back, knew which kids were having problems at home, even when they tried to hide it. In his own quiet way, he'd become part of their daily lives, a constant, reliable presence who made sure they started each day safely. At 7:18 a.m., Mike was pulling away from his final stop when he noticed the black Suburban in his mirrors. Not unusual, plenty of SUVs on the road, but this one was following a little too close, matching his speed a little too precisely. Old habits kicked in, and Mike began running through possibilities. Probably nothing. Maybe a parent running late, trying to catch the bus. Or maybe. At 7:21 a.m., the Suburban pulled alongside the bus on Highway 12, a stretch of road that ran through a wooded area between the neighborhoods and the school. Mike glanced over and saw 3 men in the vehicle, all wearing baseball caps pulled low, all looking directly at him. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. At 7:23 a.m., the Suburban swerved directly in front of Bus 47, forcing Mike to slam on the brakes. The bus came to a stop on the shoulder of the highway, its emergency flashers automatically engaging. Behind him, 26 children lurched forward in their seats, some crying out in alarm. "What's happening, Mr. Mike?" called out Katie Morrison from the third row. "Just stay in your seats, everyone," Mike said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline now flooding his system. "Keep your seatbelts on and stay quiet." 3 men got out of the Suburban. All were armed, 1 with a shotgun, 2 with pistols. They moved with purpose, but not precision, like people who had watched too many movies and thought they knew how this worked. The leader, a tall man with a scraggly beard, approached the bus door, while the other 2 flanked the vehicle. Mike's mind shifted into a mode he hadn't accessed in 4 years. Threat assessment, 3 hostiles, small arms, amateur coordination, terrain, open highway, wooded on both sides, no immediate cover. Assets, 26 children depending on him to keep them alive. Objective, neutralize the threat with 0 civilian casualties. The bearded man gestured for Mike to open the door. When Mike complied, the man climbed the steps, shotgun pointed at Mike's chest. "Morning, driver," the man said, with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "We're going to take a little detour today. You're going to drive exactly where I tell you, and nobody gets hurt. These kids are going to make us rich." Mike looked at the man calmly. "You don't want to do this." The kidnapper laughed. "Old man, I don't think you understand the situation. I've got a shotgun pointed at you, and 26 kids who are about to become very valuable. So you're going to—" That's when his eyes fell on Mike's collar. The movement of climbing into the bus had shifted the fabric just enough to reveal the edge of something green. The kidnapper squinted, trying to make out what he was seeing. "What's that on your collar?" he asked. Mike didn't answer. He didn't need to. The kidnapper reached forward and pulled back the fabric, revealing the Ranger tab in all its faded glory. His confident expression faltered as he read the words that had been earned through some of the most brutal training in military history. "Ranger. Tab," he whispered, more to himself than to Mike. Mike's voice was quiet, controlled, carrying the weight of authority earned in places where hesitation meant death. "Son, you have exactly 10 seconds to get off my bus, get back in your vehicle, and drive away. After that, this becomes a different kind of situation." The kidnapper tried to regain his composure. "I don't care what patch you got, old man. You're just a bus driver now, and—" 8 seconds, Mike interrupted. Behind him, the children were silent, sensing that something had fundamentally changed in the dynamic. They didn't understand what was happening, but they could feel the shift in energy, the way their quiet bus driver had become something else entirely. "You're bluffing," the kidnapper said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "You won't risk these kids getting hurt." 6 seconds, Mike said. "And you're right. I won't risk these kids getting hurt, which is why I'm going to eliminate the threat to them." The kidnapper raised the shotgun, but Mike was already moving. What happened next took less than 4 seconds, but it would be analyzed by law enforcement training academies for years to come. Mike's left hand swept the shotgun barrel aside, while his right hand locked onto the kidnapper's wrist. There was a sharp twist, a cry of pain, and suddenly the shotgun was in Mike's hands, and the kidnapper was on his knees in the aisle of the bus. The 2 men outside, seeing their leader go down, rushed toward the open door, but Mike was already positioning himself. The first man made it 3 steps before the shotgun stock connected with his solar plexus, dropping him instantly. The second man tried to bring his pistol around, but Mike had disarmed him and cable-tied his hands behind his back before he could blink. All 3 kidnappers were secured in less than 30 seconds. 0 shots fired, 0 children harmed. Mike keyed his radio to contact dispatch. "Bus 47 to base. I have 3 subjects in custody on Highway 12. Need law enforcement and paramedics for possible injuries." "Bus 47, did you say 3 subjects in custody? Are you okay? Are the children safe?" "All children are secure and unharmed," Mike replied. Threat neutralized. As they waited for police to arrive, Katie Morrison called out from her seat, "Mr. Mike, what just happened?" Mike looked at her in the rearview mirror, his expression gentle again, the dangerous man from moments before hidden once more behind the calm bus driver. "Just some people who made a bad choice, sweetheart. Everything's okay now." When the police arrived, 12 minutes later, they found Mike Torres sitting calmly in the driver's seat of Bus 47, 3 kidnappers zip-tied and sitting on the ground outside the bus, and 26 children who would later tell their parents about the day their quiet bus driver became a superhero. The investigation that followed revealed that Mike Torres was former Staff Sergeant Miguel "Iron Mike" Torres, 75th Ranger Regiment, with 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq. He had earned his Ranger tab through the grueling Ranger School program, where the failure rate exceeded 60% and grown men broke down crying from exhaustion and stress. His service record included numerous commendations for valor, including actions that were still classified. He had left the Army 4 years earlier after his wife was killed in a car accident while he was deployed. Unable to face another tour without her waiting at home, he had quietly retired and moved to Millbrook, looking for a simple job where he could serve his community without the weight of life and death decisions. He never expected to need his Ranger training again. The story made national news. School bus driver stops kidnapping. Ranger turned bus driver saves 26 children. Hero driver's military past revealed. But Mike declined all interview requests. He just wanted to get back to his route, back to making sure kids got to school safely. The school district offered him a promotion, a pay raise, recognition at the next board meeting. He politely declined them all. He liked his job just fine. The parents on Route 47 looked at him differently after that day. Some shook his hand. Some thanked him with tears in their eyes. Some left baked goods in his mailbox. But Mike handled it all the same way he handled everything else. Quietly, professionally, without seeking attention or praise. The kids on Bus 47 still called him Mr. Mike, but now they said it with a different kind of respect. They still got rowdy sometimes, but when he said, "Let's keep it down, guys," there was a new understanding in their silence. They might not have known exactly what a Ranger tab meant, but they knew their bus driver was someone special. Mike kept driving Route 47. Same 23 stops, same 26 kids, same quiet routine. But now he wore his Ranger tab, visible on his collar. Not because he was proud, though he was, but because sometimes wolves needed to know that sheep weren't unprotected. And sometimes, just sometimes, the guardian watching over your children isn't wearing body armor or carrying a badge. Sometimes he's wearing a bus driver's uniform and making sure your kids get to school safely, carrying skills earned in the world's most dangerous places, but hoping he'll never need to use them again. Because that's what Rangers do. They lead the way. They protect those who can't protect themselves. And they never leave anyone behind, whether that's a fellow soldier in Afghanistan or 26 kids on a school bus in Millbrook. 6 months later, Mike Torres was still driving Route 47, still the same quiet man, still the same gentle voice, still the same reliable presence in the lives of 26 children. But now, when parents saw Bus 47 coming down their street, they didn't just see a school bus. They saw a promise that their most precious cargo was in the hands of someone who would never let them down, someone who had sworn an oath to protect others and had never stopped living by that oath, even after hanging up his uniform, because once a Ranger, always a Ranger, and Rangers don't just lead the way, they make sure everyone gets home safe. That's what warriors do. They serve, they protect. And when evil shows up, thinking it's found an easy target, they remind the world that there's no such thing as just anything when a warrior is on duty. Rangers lead the way,